Welcome back to the channel. There is a lot going on right now, and I just want to talk about it. One thing on my mind, of course, is the FTX situation, and it's interesting to me how fast things blew up. It's one thing on my mind is there was a time where I was considering, to be completely honest, shorting the bear market on FTX. And I just wonder what would have happened to me if I had shorted the bear market, or if I had shorted some of the particular shorts. They could have still been in play. And would I have ended my short and removed my funds in time? Because from the little that I had paid attention to FTX, I felt that it was one of the centralized exchanges that was in a better position than some others that I was aware of, and I think they've done a good job of giving that image. The little bit I've seen of Sam, he appeared to be a relatively conservative individual, and I don't really blame some of the people that did have funds there. I mean, there's some, I don't know, it's interesting to me because one of the frustrations I had with FTX living in the US was how little I could withdraw and add to the exchange. And that's really one of the main reasons I didn't end up going with them. And it almost makes me wonder if that's the reason I didn't lose a bunch of my funds. And fortunately, I wouldn't have shorted the market with my whole portfolio or something, but I don't really care. It would have been, I mean, the numbers I was throwing around, it would have been painful to lose them. And I think there's other people that are in my position that acted on it. And I feel that I relatively narrowly potentially escaped, honestly. And Luna, it makes me remember Luna too. I'm just being honest, like people that I followed, some of them had invested in Luna, and I was just basically not convinced. It was a project that I'd had on my brainstorm. I have brainstorm pages that I just dump my thoughts into and think through things. And there was some potential games I could have played with the Luna, and I was very seriously considering using them, and I ultimately decided that it wasn't the best use of my funds. And I was really questioning the likelihood of them doing well. And it was fortunately for Luna, it was a little bit different in that I was very much questioning their ability to do well long term. And I don't honestly remember exactly what my rationale was for not going with them. And I think I was still considering them. It was still in my brainstorm pile. And I ultimately survived that one too. And it wasn't immediately obvious to me in either of these cases that I couldn't have been one of the people that was really hurt. And it's humbling. And one of the things that I'm reminded by is, I mean, it's times like these, it's bad times that show the value in being more conservative. Like when times are good and everything's going up, you look awesome. When you're not conservative and you're just throwing money at these risky things it happens to be the time that the risky assets give the return. But they're risky for a reason, and sometimes people have to be reminded of the risk. And it just reminds me to remember something that I talk about all the time if you watch me, is that I really have control over myself. I do not have control over others. For example, what is some big whales going to do? What is the owner of this contract going to do? I cannot control that. And things in this world, black swan events, which is sometimes I think an excuse. No one could have predicted this happening. That's why this happened. You want to be careful, not taking responsibility. I think it's the best to try to take as much responsibility as you can. That's what keeps you from being screwed, right? And that's what helps in the long run you do well. And I'm really just reminded by that in some of these examples. And I mean, some other thoughts I have just about the market is we've had a bear market, right? Like this compared to the bear markets in the past, we're approaching where the bottom should be when you just look at time. And this is completely an inductive correlating argument, right? It's just looking to the past to see how long it took for the bottom to be made. And we're getting close to that time. Some bottoms had already happened by now, I believe, in the history of crypto. And at the same time, we've had a bunch of bad news come out, and it's still coming out. And the positive in that to me is these are signs, these look like signs that we're getting closer to the bottom. And I put something kind of like this in a tweet today, where it's when people become impatient and when the price dumps massively that sometimes they're the most willing to sell. But really in the long run, when price had been down for a long period of time and it dumped, that was one of the best times to buy. I'm not saying that now is the best time to buy, but I mean, I would be conservative with selling right now. Use your best judgment. But you know, for some tokens, now is a better time than to buy than it has in the past. And I'm not trying to say to buy. But it's just encouraging because there's a point where we've gone down for so long. We've had so much bad news that the people that are still holding are really not going to ever sell. And if there's no one left to sell, the only place we can go is back up. And we're getting some real challenges. And people's beliefs in their projects are really being tested right now. And we'll see. I think we might, there's a real reason to think that we've got more bad news, right? This Binance FTX exchange looks to have potentially them taking over things. It appears to have fallen through, and there's a lot of what appears, some of it to be fake news. Just talking about where FTX was involved and the ripple effects of them falling apart could really affect a lot of people. I mean, and another bummer is the people that had funds there, funds in FTT token or whatever, like if that's gone, you know, that's potential buy pressure too, that's gone. And it could take a long time for this to be all worked out. And if people get any of their funds back, they'll probably get some people will probably get something, I'm assuming. It might be a while. And it's interesting. It's just looking like we're closer to the bottom to me, and that's encouraging. Yeah. So another thought on my mind is the Icosa project, and I've been kind of going out of my way to highlight the possibility that Icosa is going to drop in value relative to Hex, relative to its parity price after the auctions start. And my simple explanation and theory for that happening is that I think some of the HSIs that are bought are going to come through the HSI buyback. I can show this and at least bring up the contract. They're going to come through the HSI buyback. And I think some of those that use this function are the reason they're going to do it. Some are probably going to just take their Icosa and stake it in the Icosa pool, try to get some yield from the remaining auctions. Some are probably going to sell their Icosa. It just doesn't take a lot of Icosa to be sold on the market to affect the price. I mean, if we go up here, there's currently, for unstaked Icosa, there's a total supply of 521,000. And just to try to quantify that, that's not a lot of Icosa. Like a 10, if this is my example, you may have heard it before, but if a 10 million Hex stake goes through the buyback, or if 10 1 million, right? It doesn't matter. It's just the example, right? So but if a 10 million hex HSI goes through the buyback, he'll get 300,000 Icosa for it, around that number. And as I said, that's more than half the current supply of Icosa. So it's just an example of why I think the price might drop. If I can get the word out enough, if other people do, or if individuals, bigger players understand this, then it might not play out. What I would be looking to decide, I'll explain why I think it won't play out. If they think Icosa is going to go on sale, they'll save funds to buy it later. If you have enough people that have funds ready to keep buying up the price, then it's not going to go that far below parity. I just think that they're going to have to be ready to buy potentially a lot of Icosa. And it's going to take a lot of people ready to buy Icosa for the parity to remain through the auctions. And I will tell you, I think that's going to be a really good sign for the Icosa Hedron systems if that does happen. It's just a relatively big potential test of the system. And if it can withstand that, even if Icosa drops, but it reaches back up at parity eventually, then it's able to withstand some real testing of the system. And like I said, if we're able to absorb, potentially even the whole supply of Icosa and buy the parity back up, then that's a good sign in my book, and that's a reason to trust these contracts longer term. And that's great. And if a lot of people keep buying Icosa, a lot of more HSIs may go through this system, which will make more auctions, which burns more Hedron, and so that's a good thing. So what I was going to say was, let's make this bigger. If we go to how much hex basically we get per Icosa right now, one thing that I would be looking to that would give a hint that people are aware of this issue and are wanting to buy Icosa later would be if they're selling Icosa now. Whether they're just straight up selling Icosa they already have, or if they're using the HSI buyback system to get Icosa and then selling that. And basically that's basically a way to get more Icosa is to be selling Icosa. It's one way. And if people think it's going to go on sale, then it could be in their interest to sell now. I try not to tell people what to do. I'm just telling you guys what I see. You guys do whatever you want. It's going to be interesting. Like I thought it was interesting that we dropped below parity here. It's interesting that we went way above parity. I think the narrative has been these Icosa staking pools are going to have some real yield. The Icosa pool is a relatively uncompetitive pool. So if you have Icosa, put it in there, and you're probably going to have something to show for it. I think people are understanding that the HSIs being bought is going to burn a bunch of Hedron, and that's going to show up in Icosa in the pools. They understand there's going to be yield now. I don't know that as many people recognize this. You've already heard me talk about this. And so now I'm just watching. Like I said, one thing I'm watching is this chart here to see if we break below parity before the auctions. That just shows me, why would you sell your Icosa at a discount? It could be because you feel that it's going to be at an even bigger discount later. And so I'm just watching this, and we'll see. So for me, right now, it's exciting times. A lot is happening in crypto, a lot of FUD, Hex FUD, broader crypto FUD, and at the same time, we have the HSI auctions coming up. And for me, this is a time to play the game well, and it's also a time to understand, for me, how speculative, or basically to have a better understanding of the likelihood that Icosa and Hedron are going to work out long term. And so, like I said, if the Icosa can remain parity, if we see a bunch of Icosas go back, a bunch of HSIs go back through the HSI buyback, that's to me one of the more optimistic things that could happen. That's going to be the best for the project. If we can look forward to continuing 90 days later as these auctions are going on to more auctions, we can know that there's more yield in the pools, more Hedron being burned, and that's a good thing. So I can talk to about Paulie. A lot of people have asked me about Paulie. I've talked to Dip Catcher, Tonto. I went on his channel and talked about Paulie. I think Paulie is it's a option for people, and I think for those smaller people that don't have tons, it can be a good way to know that you're very likely to win an HSI. You also have the ability to sell your Paulie, and so you can potentially reap the benefit of staked hex, staked Hedron, because your Paulie is backed by those things, but you still have the flexibility and ability to sell. And I've talked about one of my I don't know a better word, but problems with the project is the fact that Paulie itself will not use the HSI buyback. I think it's unlikely that Paulie wins all of the HSIs. So there's still going to be people that are winning these, and they can go through. And there's also the chance that new hex stakes can continue to use the HSI buyback. That's really the best case scenario, is that we're continuing to lock up new hex stakes, max length, pulling that supply, that potential sell pressure of hex off the market for 15 more years. So, maybe that will incentivize, continue to incentivize new hex stakes to go through the HSI buyback, because it will have less sell pressure pushing down the Icosa. Maybe it'll work out well without Paulie using that function. Maybe it really will be the best thing for the project. And but for me right now, I'm not planning to get Paulie. And I could change my mind. Just right now, I'm not planning to. I think I have enough Hedron to be pretty competitive in the bidding for these HSIs if I decide to do that. And so that's just me, myself, and I like the flexibility of compounding my Icosa yield and doing some other things that I might want Hedron for. And so, I mean, in another obvious observation is Hedron and Icosa, like we're stacking projects on projects on projects with Paulie. We have Hex project that if Hex project fails for whatever reason, Hedron and Icosa are gone. If Hedron fails, Icosa's gone. If Icosa fails, Hedron's gone. Basically, if Paulie fails, well then now you're just stacking on. If Hedron fails, then Paulie's gone. Like it is. I would say it's a low risk. It's just a reality of the situation, and it's not a reason I wouldn't do it. That's not why I'm not trading my Hedron for Paulie, but it's a real thing to consider. And yeah, so exciting times, a lot going on, a lot to look forward to still, and it's getting to be some tough times. But another cool thing, in my opinion, if the Hedron price, people have been saying the Hedron price is dropping, we thought it was going to raise relative to even Hex going into the auctions, and it's dropped. If the Hedron price drops during the auctions, if it's going lower versus Hex, to me that's actually positive for the projects, because it's very likely that's going to result in more Hedron being burned. Because if, for example, you have a $10,000 HSI, if you have an HSI worth $10,000, then let's see here, HSI 10K, and auctions, I don't think auctions are going to go, it's unlikely that, in my opinion, this is speculation, that they're going to go for their dollar value in Hedron. I don't think that they're going to reach each other. I don't think people are going to give up 10K worth of Hedron for a 10K HSI. It's possible. I would love to see that. That'd be really interesting. But basically, it doesn't matter, because it does matter. But if people are going ahead and bidding 7K for a 10K HSI, and the Hedron price is down versus Hex, 7K is still more Hedron than if it, right, it's a bigger total amount of Hedron. And I think that psychologically people are going to be looking at the HSIs that way. They're going to be comparing the Hedron dollar value versus the HSI dollar value, and they're going to feel good about it if they're getting the bigger the difference, like the less they're paying for these, the more they're going to like it. And if the Hedron price is down, they're still going to get good deals, but they're actually burning more Hedron. And that could actually be good for the system. Like I said, I just feel like we really need to get rid of a bunch of Hedron supply. So anyway, guys, lots going on. Like I said, lots of thoughts. Thanks for watching. And I'm glad to be going through this with you and sharing my thoughts for what they're worth. Thanks for everything. Talk to you later.